Clive Alcock, welcome to Place Focus.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Can you tell us what your favourite place in the world is and why?
I find it difficult to pick a favourite place, but in thinking about this one, picked the type of place that I like, and this was in my transition from studying planning to getting an interest in urban design. We had a lecturer who came in once a week from the architecture school called Bertram Gilbert, and he gave us the rundown of the history of architecture, and one of his favourite places was Todi in Umbria, a little hill town. Not of any particular note, a typical Italian hill town, and many years later with my wife we went on a frosty day up the hill on a local school bus to Todi, and I got to experience the place at about 2 degrees centigrade, and it was a real thrill to finally see this thing that I'd studied many years earlier. And it's up here. This was the view that Bertram described to us as the sweeping views of Umbria, but it's a confined urban place, a highly urban feeling. We sat there for the whole morning into early afternoon. We saw the morning cafe, the chairs come out for lunch. We saw the path of the sun across the square, the life unfolding in what's a very simple urban place with a lot of density, life and activity around it, but the view out to the hills, so the glimpse of nature being incorporated, and that it was a very normal but very thrilling place to be in. So
based on that experience, what do you think are the key qualities that we should be trying to deliver in our places?
The key qualities that were there, which I try to adhere to in the work that we do, are to try to get as much life as possible, to focus on the place making, to make it as active and interesting as possible. Now, you can't do that in the quieter backwaters of the residential areas, but in focal point places, to make them truly public, to make them truly democratic, so that people can move around in them easily. Someone doesn't come up and tell you to stop taking photographs of them. The place has to have an economic rationale, a reason for being. So it has to, typically the older towns were on the crossroads of movement routes or in defensible positions. There was a reason, and in the structuring of the new places we do, there still has to be a reason. It still has to be operate on a movement economy, or be walkable, or in a particularly interesting location. It needs some kind of driving rationale, and then it needs to be well executed, which is typically a problem that we find in new places. There's a lot of good town planning, a lot of good urban design done, and architectural concepts, but when it comes to the implementation at a development level, often many years later, a lot of the thinking is forgotten, and the place resorts to standard types instead of more appropriate typologies of buildings. And
are you suggesting that places shouldn't change then?
I think that places definitely should be designed to change over time, and somewhere that you visited recently, Rouse Hill, I think has a problem in that it's built at one time on a big parking platform, and I think it'll be very difficult to adapt and change over time. It's built under one ownership, which theoretically may be an advantage, but inbuilt design for change is really important. The subdivision pattern, the development pattern, the way that buildings relate to parking and to the street is intimately tied to their capacity to change over time. But the initial often you only get one stab at the initial concept in the work you do, and then the initial phase of implementation, and it behoves you to consider implementation of the place at least as carefully, if not more so, than the design and planning of the place. And that's what I think is lacking in many of our newer places.
Kelvin Grove Urban Village is a new centre in Brisbane which has taken a slightly different approach where it's subdivided into smaller parcels and then sold them off. Is that a better way of doing it, do you think?
I think it is. It's harder because the typical development situation is that people are trying to get in and out relatively quickly. They can't afford to hold land for a long time. Some of the most innovative development that you and I visited in the States was done by individuals or families that had owned the land for a long time, and the land owed them nothing. The normal process of development doesn't allow so easily for that accretive thing to happen over time, but I think it's definitely desirable, and some of the government projects, government-sponsored partnership projects around Australia demonstrate that a careful approach to parcellisation and subdivision of sites can create a much more interesting outcome over time.